Excellencies, fellow parliamentarians, ladies and gentlemen. Good morning and thank you for this opportunity to make an intervention for this session. Exactly a week ago on Earth Day, 175 nations, including the Philippines, formally signed the Paris Agreement on Climate Change at the United Nations headquarters in New York. Now, we await the affirmation of the commitments through the completion of ratification or accession processes of each country. The Philippines has joined calls for the early entry into force of the agreement by ensuring that at least 55 nations representing 55% of global greenhouse gas emissions will ratify the agreement within the year. To date, at least 50 nations have ratified the Paris Agreement. These successes in the global arena bring hope for the future, even as we know that much of the grueling work needs to be done in our respective countries and local communities to translate these international commitments into national policies and eventually into urgent local action that will directly provide positive impact on people's lives. More than 2 decades ago, the Philippine Supreme Court, in a landmark decision that upheld the concept of intergenerational responsibility, said, and I quote, "The day would not be too far when all else would be lost, not only for the present generation, but also for those to come, generations which stand to inherit nothing but parched earth, incapable of sustaining life," unquote. These words are no longer prophetic as we begin to feel the adverse impacts of climate change, the degradation of the environment, loss of biodiversity, and ecosystems decline. Farmers in my country have become restless as they seek for food, subsidies. Their lands are drying up because of a drought brought about with the extended El Niño, making it impossible for them to grow anything. It is truly lamentable that the very people who till the soil, the land, so that others may have their share of rice on their table, are now begging for food. The Philippine Congress was not remiss in providing the legal framework to address environmental concerns. Laws and policies have been introduced, not just to demand accountability for environmental issues, but also to provide impetus to incorporate environmental and climate concerns into planning and policy making. Landmark laws that have been enacted have been hailed as model legislation. The Clean Air Act, Clean Water Act, Ecological Solid Waste Management Law, the Renewable Energy Law, the Climate Change Act, the Disaster Risk Reduction and Management Act, and the People's Survival Fund, among others. In my capacity as a chair of the Senate Committee on Finance, we were able to transform the national budget into one that is climate adaptive and disaster resilient. We have mainstreamed provisions that ensure that the implementation of government programs towards building resilience is incorporated. However, the plan of action is not only with the legislature. It is not limited to the crafting of laws and policies. It requires the involvement of whole government. Political will is needed to translate laws into action with measurable gains. Holding government, businesses, industry, the public at large to greater accountability for their actions is expected. But more than that, we need these laws and circumstances that led to their passage to be appreciated, understood, implemented by everyone. Effective enforcement emanates from everyone's understanding and appreciation of responsibility and accountability. It is in this light, considering the Philippine Senate's oversight function to review the implementation of laws that have been passed, that I proposed for Congress, for an environmental audit covering the performance of relevant national agencies and local government units in relation to their enforcement of all our environment and climate laws, regulations, and compliance guidelines to identify where implementation can be supported and how to remove all the barriers to its implementation. We have willing partners. The Commission on Audit has done its assessment on disaster risk reduction and management practices in light of the tragedy brought about by Typhoon Haiyan. Our government auditors have been tasked to train their objective lens and keen eye for detail on environmental matters as these affect the financial statements of government, business, and individuals. The country's Office of the Ombudsman has also taken a significant step towards achieving full implementation of the Ecological Solid Waste Management Law. It launched the Solid Waste Management Law Voluntary Compliance Program, which is comprised of two phases. One, to assess our local government units as to their compliance with the provisions of the law, which is 15 years old. It has now entered into the second phase, which is the filing of cases against non-compliant local governments. From this example alone, we are able to understand that the implementation process is holistic and involves all actors. In closing, I wish to stress that the success of any law lies on the completion of the multifaceted public policy process, from the initial phase of crafting laws to the implementation stage on the local level. It encourages the involvement of stakeholders, and it is a concerted effort. Even as it seems that as legislators, our work is done once we pass a law, we must take that extra mile, that extra effort to monitor its implementation. Each of us is responsible in keeping our environment, our planet, Mother Earth, healthy, clean, safe, resilient for this and future generations. Climate change is in our midst, and the message is quite telling. We do not own the planet. We are mere dwellers and stewards of the earth. We must all work towards building a sustainable community, one that respects the abundance of Mother Nature and corrects the misconception that natural resources are infinite. We need to veer away from consumptive practices. Greed must cease. I repeat, intergenerational responsibility needs to move from being an idea, an abstraction, to a plan of concrete and urgent action. The time to act is now. There is no planet B. Thank you.